Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us today. I am joined by my friend Nicole Murray, who is a Space Force spouse, former Air Force spouse, now Space Force spouse, and a consultant. Nicole, hey, how are you?
Hey Sue, how's it going?
Great. And we were just chatting about how alert she looks because she's jet lagged, and you were such a trooper to come and chat with us today. You
Yeah,
look
I
so.
love
So I was gonna say, I sent you a bunch of questions, but before we talk about these questions, just in case people have not already read your highlight, I wonder if
it.
you could talk to us a little bit about your prior position with the NATS organization, because I think that helps set the stage a little bit for the next set of questions. Would that be okay?
Sure. So the Nats are the Washington Nationals Baseball Club, which is Major League Baseball in the Washington, D.C. area. And I was actually with the Washington Nationals for 14 seasons. We go by seasons and not years in sports, but 14 seasons, which is sort of unheard of, particularly in the military community. Um, my role with the Nats evolved over time, but at the end, I was the director of community relations for the team. And that meant that I handled all of their community affairs, most relevant for this conversation and sort of the biggest focus for me was their military platform and the outreach to the military community in the DC area. So I was there for 14 years and I stayed through my last PCS. My husband got orders to Hawaii. And so that was a very obvious time for change.
But I mean, you were there when they won their World Series.
Mhm.
And then you were there when Eamon actually PCSed a few times and you decided to geobatch. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, that's really the focus of the rest of the questions because, there are people out there who are probably considering geobatching. And, since you've been through it, I mean, 14 seasons means that's probably three PCSs that you had to be a part. And I really do encourage you guys all to go read Nicole's highlight because she talks about like the impact of that on their family, on her career, et
Mhm.
cetera. Some tips there. But so like where we're picking up is where that kind of leaves off, which is, you've had your fair share of geobatching, which we just talked about. Do you have tips for people who are either considering it or are currently going through it?
Absolutely. And I think it all starts with conversations and having conversations, mostly with your partner, but with a lot of different, a lot of people in your life. But you have to have very candid, uncomfortable conversations. And you have to talk about, the emotional aspect of it, the logistical, the financial. There are things that you're going to have to go through. Geobatching is not easy. And you have to have those conversations not only when you decide to do it, but throughout the period of time that you're doing it, because feelings change. And when you're in it, the reality of it might be, too much for one of you. And you, the bottom line is if you're not both in agreement, then it's not going to work. It's not going to be successful. So there are definitely periods of time where we felt the strain a little bit more than others, but we had the conversations, and life happened. I mentioned in the questions, I was getting ready to move down to Alabama to be with my husband, and we got pregnant. It was a high risk pregnancy, and the better decision was to stay in DC. So um, I don't think when you geobatch, you ever intend it to be a certain length of time, but it's just sort of those steady conversations like you would have before any PCS. What makes sense for our family in this moment? What can we handle? There's the financial piece of maintaining two households. Then if you have kids already, there's, sort of there's a layer of that as well.
And so, just in case anybody's wondering, Nicole is not from the DC area because I wonder if people will say, oh, she probably geobached and stayed in DC because her family's in DC. That is not the case.
No.
So, the same issues that you would have if you decide to geobatch someplace where you didn't have the family support system are the same issues that Nicole faced. So having a high risk pregnancy and making that decision to stay here could not have been easy.
Yeah,
Um,
and that was the very later years of the geobatch. We geobatched for 5 years, and a lot of it came down to I had a job that I loved and work that was fulfilling. We thought my husband is, he's now a colonel in the Space Force. Eamon Murray, Eamon, I thought was doing like a 1 year tour in Colorado. We said, well, that doesn't make sense right now. For me to go for 1 year, that doesn't make sense. Um, but those are the conversations you kind of have. And then obviously, as we know in the military, plans change. Reality is somewhat different than what you expect, and you have to readjust.
Yeah, because you and I were talking about that article that came out a couple of weeks ago that we're both like still hot about, where an army, I think reservist or someone who is affiliated with the Army Guard maybe, but he's a congressional member now who said that, military spouses knew what they were signing up for. And we talked about it, which is quite frankly, no, none of us know what we sign up for because you never know how long an assignment's going to last. You never know how long a career is going to last, a service
Mhm.
member's career. So you actually don't know what you're signing up for.
I don't
Um,
think anybody does. And I mean, especially as spouses, like, God forbid we change and evolve over time and, what we want professionally or personally changes. The military culture over the past 20 years that I've been doing this has changed. So yeah, it's as you said, we're both still hot about it.
and with good reason. But like this is a perfect segue to the next question because when you talk about how things change, professional circumstances change, you went from working for an employer running
Mhm.
your own program to all of a sudden being a consultant and working
Mhm.
on your own. I mean, were there any surprises there?
Oh, of course. I think, anytime you make a leap, whether that's professionally or personally, things they're going to be surprises. And I talked with geobatching about communication, but the same thing happens, professionally. And when I was examining sort of my options and talking through, I had a sort of when we knew we were PCSing and going to Hawaii, which is still a state, but is remote in the middle of the Pacific.
Little
Though not
CONUS. Yeah,
everybody
they
knows
still
that it's a
considered
state
CONUS.
apparently. What?
Still considered CONUS.
Yeah, still considered Onconus. Um, but I thought this was going to be easier. I thought it was going to be easier for me to find a job. I felt confident with my experience and confident in my network, but found that the opportunities that I was getting just weren't the right fit. And then as I examined not only my career and what I wanted to do, but also what my husband was having to do here was a little bit different than what we had expected. The travel was a bit more, I guess, a lot more. Really, I'm being kind. Um, we just had to figure out like what made sense for me in this stage of life and this sort of stage of my career. And so consulting really afforded me the most flexibility and the most opportunity. So I have some projects that I'm really excited about. I'm still, the goal is still to find something long term, ideally remote so that it can move with me in 10 months. But um, it really has been a good fit for right now. But those were conversations that I needed to have with my spouse, with my mentors, with my peers, other consultants in the industry, other, military spouses who have done something similar, my accountant. I went through an MBA program a few years ago, and so I relied heavily on, my network of professors and support staff and some of my peers in that program as well, who have been down this path. So it takes a village, but your village isn't always right or sitting right next to you, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because I know that any entrepreneur would agree, which is you can't go it alone because it's the easiest way to just feel overwhelmed and just isolated, right?
Yep.
We talk about that at NMSN, we talk about that a lot, because we have our little cohorts of people that, kind of stick together closely because we all are entrepreneurs and you can get lonely like sitting in your space just doing your work and you're like, I have not spoken to another person in like 3 days, about
Yeah,
work. And so
it's one of those things where, especially coming from a place where I was with the same people for so long, it is a solo endeavor, and there are surprises, as a consultant compared to what I was doing. You still have a team, you're still part of the team, but you're not.
right.
And there are aspects of being a consultant, especially depending on what sort of work that you're doing, where you're still sort of on the outside, and you have to hand off a project eventually. At some point, you want this project or this solution to outlive you and outlive your time with that organization. And that was, I guess, the biggest operational surprise for me because I'm just not used to doing it. Um, there is an aspect to consulting work where you may have a really great solution, but it's not the right fit for the team that the organization has in place, and they may not have the resources or the time or whatever have you to commit to it. And you have to. That means the solution's not going to work. You can't just roll up your sleeves and dive in and help out. You have to make something that is the right fit for at the right time.
Absolutely. See, you're already on your way to being an excellent consultant because that's like not being wedded to the solution is actually I think the first lesson that you have to learn as a consultant because we're like, but it would really work well for you. But if they're not bought in, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
But I had not realized like how many military spouses were working in the sports arena because I just interviewed another military spouse for a highlight, and she had actually started in sports marketing. I'm sorry, sports management, and
Okay.
then it had been her hope that that was what she was going to do throughout her career, and then she had to pivot and to small business ownership because it wasn't working, and
Mhm.
so it was interesting because I guess I never really thought of sports as an option for military spouses because I did not think it was that portable. But I mean, there's still a lot of interest out there. So for those people who want to work in sports, whether it's management, marketing, or communications, do you have any tips on how to get plugged in and find some opportunities?
Yeah, I like I said, I can do a whole session just on this, but I know it's not the answer most people want to hear, but a lot of it is networking. Like you have to put yourself out there, whether you're a military spouse or anybody who wants to get into sports. There's a huge demand for sports jobs and not a lot of sports jobs to fill. So everybody always says, it's all about who you know. And I had an old boss that said it's not who you know, it's who knows you. But if you are looking to get into sports, you need to start talking to people about what that is and what that means because, things like saying, I want to work in communications or I want to work in marketing. Well, that's really broad, right? So what does that mean? Talking to me about what I do is different than the person sitting, two desks down from me, even though our job titles or our skills and experience might be similar. So having those informational interviews with people, they know that you're looking for a job, but just having those informational interviews where you're learning more about the industry is really, really important. Um, and then, so you have to go out, go to the networking events, go to the panels and stay to talk to the panelists later. And, you want to prioritize in-person communication as much as possible, but supplement it with LinkedIn, supplement it with email and things like that. Be cognizant of the cadence of a season. Don't send me an email in the middle of the postseason or leading up to opening day. It's going to get buried and I'm going to ignore it. But um, you know, there are people who help me get where I am, and so I want to do that same thing for other people, especially people just starting out. Um, and then the second piece of that would be, if you can't work in sports right away, work with sports. And there
Mhm.
are plenty of organizations, whether that be corporate businesses. I mean, you can look, around Nats Park and see who our corporate partners are, right? So, who are the people at an SAIC or a Delta or whomever who are working with us to manage those partnerships. On my side of things, who are the nonprofits that the Nats are working with who they obviously have a connection to somebody on that end. I always talk, this one particular nonprofit, they have a whole sports and entertainment activation department where they were, they're well more connected than I am, because they know people all across the industry. And then, look beyond I worked for a team, which is, I think, what people automatically sort of migrate to when they think about sports, but leagues is an entirely different experience. And then you have, a lot of the support nonprofits and things like that. You have sports agencies, you have sports marketing firms, you have sports partnership firms. There's a lot of options out there about working around sports. So that would be my best advice for anybody just, trying to get their foot in the door or just get a basic understanding of what's out there.
No, that's really smart. And I mean, I feel like you're leaving people with a lot of tips. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody and like continue on too far with this, because we could literally talk all day because we have spoken
We
and have talked at length and we enjoy it. But like, I want to give you an opportunity. Like, I asked this of some people, what did I not ask that I should have asked? Whether it's about working in sports, whether it's about geobatching or pivoting or balance, or, yes, you can have it all, just not all at once. What is it? What should I have asked you?
I think the biggest thing for me, particularly with this move, this was a tough move for me. You know, being with the Nats was became part of my identity. And so when you lose that, there's a very emotional piece that comes with it. And you sort of question, you know, everything really. But I think you have to be honest with yourself and what you are looking for. You know, find your resources. Sure, there were a lot of people that helped me in the middle of this transition, and they're still helping me. I have sort of my little board of trustees, my personal board of trustees that I go to, of which Sue is one of them, that I go to for mentorship. But you have to sit down and have kind of uncomfortable conversations with yourself about, you know, what makes sense and when. And you have to, you give yourself some grace. Like, your goals don't always have to be the same. You know, are your goals working for you in the space that you are in right now? And I think that can be tough. Any sort of self-reflection like that. And sometimes it's a luxury, especially when you're PCSing and you've got a family and everybody's, you know, a little bit scattered and, you know, emotions are running high. But you have to figure out what makes sense for you in the moment that you're in. And that
No,
would
I
be
love
my
that.
best advice, you know, as you're approaching PCS, as you're approaching any sort of professional change. And then once you have that conversation with yourself, talk to yourself. Once you have,
Don't
you
answer.
ask everybody, you know what to ask, who to ask for help, and you know what questions you should be asking. Otherwise, you're going down a path that it's not really going to benefit you. It's not going to serve you.
I know it doesn't seem like it to you, but like to those of us on the outside, it feels and looks like you're going through the transition very gracefully.
Oh,
Um,
well, that's delightful.
because I mean, like being with an organization for 14 seasons and having to like start off on your own, even if it's, even if it's by choice, it's still not easy. So good for you, Nicole. And I can't wait to see what you do next. And if you guys have questions for Nicole, like put them in the comments because we know where to find her. So we'll get the questions to her and she'll answer them.
Yeah.
But at this point, I want to thank our friends over at USAA for making these conversations possible. And I hope that you guys will submit your own military spouse stories for highlighting because we would love to know more about what you're doing and like to know where military spouses are all over the globe, right? So Nicole, anything else to say to everybody?
No, I am happy to be part of this community, happy to serve the community, and hope to hear more of your stories, because we've all got them. We've all
Yeah.
got them, the good stuff and the bad stuff.
Yes, share your stories, share your experiences. So thanks guys. I hope to see you guys back here next week. Talk to you soon. Bye.